Last week we did a segment in the GP users group about Dynamics GP versus Dynamics Business Central, and I did not get a chance to finish the presentation at that time. So today I wanted to go ahead and finish it. I am Joe DeRuyter, and I'm the Business Apps Practice Manager at Aisling Dynamics Business Solutions. And today we want to focus on the user experience. But first, I wanted to clear up some general miscommunications and the messaging around Business Central. One, let's talk about licensing and the differences there. GP is a concurrent user license. Each user license costs around $3,500 a user, but within GP, because of its concurrent messaging, licensing, I guess, that means that you can buy 5 users, but then you can set up hundreds of users. It's just that only 5 of those users at a time can be in GP. Business Central is different. Business Central is a named user license, and it is controlled in your Azure Active Directory security. So you would buy the licenses. And right now, just the standard base product is about $70 a month per user. But they have standard, like the standard, somebody's got to get in there and make the entries type user at $70. But they also have stepped users. So you can have team members who enter time. People going in and running reports are different. I mean, you can deploy those in BC and Power BI and some other areas. So it's not that you have to pay $70 for every person who needs to access it in your organization. But that's a conversation to have with your partner on who needs full access, but it's completely different. So if you grant someone access, only they can use that license. But in GP, that licensing cost per user is kind of over and above the cost of the software. In BC, that includes the cost of the software. So the license and the user and the software are kind of wrapped up in the same cost. To top that off, there's just more functionality out of the box with Business Central. And so you would also be able to do a discovery and decide what of your other applications that you've had to bring in to compensate for GP's maybe lack of that particular functionality. You can get rid of those. So there's a ton going on here. It's not as simply as this versus that. But the other things you look at is with Dynamics GP, when an upgrade or an update comes out, the year-end update, for example, you're paying your partner to do the update because the partner has to log in. It's an on-premise solution. You've got to move the databases or, back them up. You've got to run the update per database, and that takes some time. There's troubleshooting because things can go wrong. BC gets updated automatically and in the background. So those yearly updates and every couple of year upgrades that you're paying for, that cost would also go away for the most part. So when you're doing a cost analysis, it's not as simple as, this versus that, because in GP, because it is an older software, and let me clarify, I love that product, but it is an older software. So there's a significant cost to setting up and turning on this and setting up and turning on that. The updates, the upgrades, other troubleshooting. This is all, a pretty significant cost to some companies, especially those running payroll in GP. We'll talk about that in a second, but that cost goes away with Business Central because all of that happens in the background. I mean, you'll get alerted when your software has been updated with new functionality. You'll be told the new functionality that's there, what they did in the update, but it's in the background. Your partner doesn't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Stuff like that. So remember, when you're doing a cost analysis, it's not as simple as this user cost this and that user cost that. The other thing you need to remember is that in GP, If you go to some of the higher echelons of functionality, like project accounting and field service, along with manufacturing, that software cost is $10,000 over and above the regular GP price. If you move to Business Central, you've got that $70 base cost, but in Business Central, that includes project accounting. And it's a cool little project accounting app, which we'll talk about in other webinars. But for $30 a month more per user, you can add in manufacturing and field service. And the field service module for Business Central is just freaking amazing. So we'll talk more about how it integrates in and does this and that. Again, today we're going to focus, mainly on the user experience. But I do have a couple more general slides to go through. App capabilities. There's a lot of miscommunication about this. BC is not a new product. So if you're hearing BC is a new untested product, that is not the case. BC is based on the old and still viable Microsoft Navision, which has been around as long, if not a little bit longer, than Dynamics GP, which was initially Great Plains. So it's a tried and a true software. It is just the online version of Navision. It is different than GP. So in that case, you're never going to see like, well, GP has this, does BC have that? The answer is pretty much yes. It may look a little bit different, feel a little bit different, but the capability is there and pretty much, and then some, in my opinion. Is it an upgrade from GP? If you are getting the messaging from partners that you have to upgrade to Business Central, that too is a miscommunication. It is not an upgrade. It is a completely different software with a different structure, different configuration. So when you're talking about moving from GP to Business Central, yes, there's some tools to help. There's this, there's that. That's not part of today's webinar. The clear answer is this. It's not an upgrade. It's a completely new implementation. So it would be as if you bought anything else. So just because it's a Microsoft product doesn't mean it's an upgrade. It means when you budget for this, you need to budget for several hours of discovery, depending on your company size and complexity. You could end up needing to do 40 to 60 hours worth of discovery so that the partner who's assisting you can make sure that it's configured correctly. Just like GP, if GP is not configured, is GP not working for you? Great, that's a good question. Is the first question I have, if that's your response that GP is not working, is, well, why isn't GP working? Is it just not configured right? I can't tell you the number of times I've heard from my new clients that their old partner said, well, GP just doesn't do that. You're probably going to hear things like that in the future, like BC doesn't do that. In my experience, this is not the case. The case may be that the consultant you're working with doesn't know the software and will either tell you it has to be customized or it just doesn't do it. Make sure that when you're working with someone, they're extremely knowledgeable about the product, because if you ever hear the phrase, it doesn't do that, make sure you yourself take it upon yourself to research whether it does or doesn't, because I've heard that far too often in my career now. GP does a crazy amount of stuff, and I've been working in this software for close to 25 years now, and I really haven't run across something that just flat out can't be done. Sometimes it takes creativity, but it's a full-on software and can pretty much do everything. The same for BC. If you hear it can't do it, it doesn't do it, that's likely because whoever you're working with just doesn't know how, and you need to research it and work with them so that you're all on the same page about the capabilities. Is it right for your organization to move right this second? Right now, you want new functionality. And again, that comes down to a question. Is GP not working because it's not configured right? Or is it not working because you need a more modern solution, one that takes less effort, a solution that is already set up for today's remote workspace? If you're on BC versus GP, there aren't, if you get the online version and not the on-prem version, you don't have server costs. There's IT costs that go away. There's a huge cost analysis you would need to do to compare the cost there, but it's not the same, so it's not ever going to be apples to apples. Again, remember, none of Microsoft's applications are plug and play. So make sure whenever you do this, you are ready for the cost of a full discovery on how to set it up. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Again, like I've covering this, you've got a budget for where you're going, but just be careful of the messaging as well. You've got a ton of GP partners that are dedicated to Dynamics GP, and so is my organization. It's just that my organization also has a BC practice, and we don't have all our eggs in one basket. So you may come across a partner who's written a customization for GP, or their entire practice is based on something they did specifically for GP. Those people will confuse you with the messaging because they have a stake in the game that you stick with GP. So make sure you're getting, unaudited advice as far as what's true versus what's not true. And it's like politics in the US. It's up to you to research what's true or what's not at times. Okay, today's user experience, I'm very excited about because in our organization, we are using Business Central as our back office solution. So we're not just selling it, we actually use it here, which I like because in that way, like I know, what it can do. I'm in it every day, doing my own work. So it makes it easier for us to advise and that sort of thing because just like with GP, I was an end user first before I became a partner. And so I know the limitations of GP, I know the frustrations, and during trainings, I can speak to both. No software is going to be 100% just easy, click a button, this and that. So just bear in mind as we go through, I love Dynamics GP. If you're on it and it's working for you and you don't feel like changing, I'm with you. But I'm also now a great lover of Business Central and just the ease with which reporting happens, with accessing it. I can be on the road, get on a hotspot, and be able to do my work. So there's some give and takes. But for today's discussion, I'm not talking about the person who just needs to review data or approve data, or the person who's with your organization that administers your data or your background softwares, or your partner. I'm talking about the person who's day-to-day in there using the software and what the differences look like to them. So logging in is my first. Again, Business Central, if it's not on-prem, if it's on-prem, you can deploy it in the cloud as well, just like you can use some workarounds to deploy GP in the cloud. But Business Central is made just out of the box to deploy over the internet, or I'm using bunny air quotes, you can't see it, but the cloud. So again, like when I log into BC, there's no software on my machine, though you can get a desktop version. I use the online version and I kind of love it. Logging into GP, it's a software that sits on your machine. So someone has to install it on your new machine. It has to be installed exactly correctly on your machine. There's none of that install issues when it comes to the online version of Business Central. And again, talk to your partner. There are some very interesting, workarounds. If you want it on-prem, you can have it on-prem. If you want to access it online, you can. If you want to have a desktop app instead of using your Internet Explorer or Chrome, you can. Okay. So the good and the bad about logging in, good about BC, you can log in from home, the road, the Starbucks, pretty much anywhere. Since it's not necessarily on premise, you won't have any of those issues. Again, we just went through some of this stuff. Of course, I want to make sure that you each understand that because it can be deployed online like this, if your users are allowed to save passwords, make sure they're trained not to save a password online. Because if it is deployed online and their passwords are saved, your Business Central is not secure. So that is a discussion to have with your partner about the security around Business Central. But for the most part, it's your Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. So it's your named user, the same one you log into your email with. And then someone within the Business Central application can give you access to what you do and don't do in Business Central. The bad about that is you can log in from anywhere. That becomes unsecure at times, in my view, and it also kind of opens you up to the fact that you'll never get away from work. Some of us, I've been working remotely since the mid-2000s, so I'm used to it. I have a routine, but you need to make sure that conversation happens with your employees as well. Like, when are you actually responsible for getting into the software? What's good about GP? It feels more secure to me than Business Central does because it is on-prem. And again, there is an on-prem version of BC as well. What's bad about it is all the installations, the very specific settings for installations, the troubleshooting and installation. If you get a new user and your stuff isn't deployed in the cloud, as Microsoft's kind of moving to, then when your IT department, they have to order a computer, they have to configure the computer, they have to do all these installs and that sort of thing. That in itself is a cost and a frustration that goes above board. And then every now and then, if your install's not configured correctly, that's just going to cause all kinds of issues. I've never really liked that about GP, but I've worked with it because that's what you do when you love something. So again, setting up access to GP and reporting, it's not all in one place, kind of like BC, but it's a combo of GP, SQL, Windows permissions, tons of stuff like that. So there's a huge difference with security and that kind of thing. So let's take a look at a comparison of the home screens. One, GP here, home screen is what you're used to. Everything's deployed by module. If you want to get to something, it's a drop down. You've got to go into that module page and get to your transactions or your reports or what have you. So again, it's drop downs here and there. What I love, and you have to know where what you're looking for is. In Business Central, and I'm going to show you this in a second, but you've still got the drop downs. You can still go to pages, that sort of thing. But they also have an awesome search functionality. So if you want to enter a purchasing invoice or a sales invoice, you don't necessarily have to navigate around to it. You can use that really cool search functionality. So let's kind of take a look at that. So if I want to come in here and enter a purchase invoice or a purchase order, boom, that search moves pretty fast. And then it's a matter of getting there, entering it, and kind of going. If I want to get to a sales invoice, I don't necessarily have to do drop downs. I can just pretty much use this search tool and find whatever it is about sales that I want to do. If I need to enter a new customer, I can just quickly do the search. There's also a method for exploring and finding that sort of thing. But you see here, there's vendors, and I want to show you that they show you your vendor statistics and stuff like that, things you'd have to configure inquiries to do in GP. But I like that you can see all of the information about your vendor, your customer, in pretty much one place in BC. All right, changing companies is another interesting development. If I want to change companies in Business Central, and most of you know how to change companies in GP, so I'm not going to show you that, but it's clicking My Settings, using this little drop down, and moving to your other company. Now I'm going to cut away before you actually see my other company page, but it pretty much goes this fast, kind of boom, and you're done. It's the other thing I like about using Business Central on the online version in particular is that, how sometimes when you start GP, you got to sit there and freaking wait for it to load before you can log in. There's none of that delay in this online version of Business Central. Okay, we're going to enter a payables transaction here and kind of show you kind of how easy it is. Now, one thing I like, I'm going to pause here, is when you first go in to configure Business Central, or you're playing around, and you can get a sample version of Business Central to play around in to see if you're going to like it before you actually commit. And that's something you can talk to your partner about as well. But you're going to see fields in here that you may not understand, or that just doesn't apply to users in the United States, like this DIOT of operation. It may not apply to you, but I want to show you how cool the help is. So I want to see, what is this DIOT of type of operation? Every field has that drop down about what this field is, and a learn more you can go to. Now I kind of want to show you, I don't want to see that. So you can go to personalize within your own settings, and you see how easy it is to hide that field. I don't need that field. So I can quickly hide that field and kind of go on with my life because I just don't want it cluttering up my screen. The other thing is when you go to personalize, you can actually add more fields and custom fields to these various windows that we're seeing. Although I did not record any type of sample of that. Oops. Let me go back. Let me start this up again. All right, let's get to where we were. All right. So again, I'm going to go ahead and hit personalize and get rid of that field for me. On my settings. And each of your users could be different. Each of your companies could be different. You may have an international company that does need that field. So that was just super quick. You're going to enter the invoice number the same as always. And then of course you've got tons of options in the drop downs. And I'm doing a regular payables invoice here. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I could use an item. I could be buying a fixed asset, that sort of thing. And we're just kind of going to play around here and show you what an error looks like. So if I did say it was an item and that item doesn't exist, it's going to tell me why I'm getting an error. And then of course, but it's easier to fix because all you have to do is hit that revert change. And I mean, I can't even tell you how much I love that. You can also write comments within here. It's no type of transaction line, but you can write like a comment here and it stays with it. So you see, I can't even fill out any of that stuff. So let's get on with the payables entry. And just like in GP, payables is pretty much just some GL accounts. But you see here, I want to do rent. And I want to go back here just a second and show you how easy it was to find that rent. Maybe you don't even know your chart of accounts. You can search quickly just by typing in the name of the account that you want to use. I love that. And then of course, quantity, unit of measure in a GL entry is not needed. You just put the final in there. And then if you have a line item discount, it's coded right there. Department codes and things like that. In GP, you have multiple segments in your chart of accounts. That's not the way BC operates. In BC, you can set up dimensions for reporting, but you have the one basic GL account for rent or for this or for that. Your dimensions, when you hear the word dimensions for BC, that's the same as one of your other reporting segments in your chart of accounts in GP. So there's a couple places I can enter these dimension codes, and I'm going to show you what it looks like here. So this is an entry for my sales department. That's another custom group that I'm not using that you saw here, but I want to show you here. I could have entered the department code there. So we're going to show the customization again. For instance, there's that department code I could have entered, but I absolutely don't need the currency code in my situation. So I'm going to hide that field. I could hide the VAT field again, and VAT has to do with some European taxing. And other things in here I could enter on this transaction to make it more viable for what I need to see. And if you keep an eye on the right of the screen there, that's more information specifically on that vendor. And I don't have to go looking and seeing as I'm entering, You know, I clearly see the last payment date there. And then there are some other reports and forecasts I could be filling in for more information on that particular vendor. And again, that stuff is configuring. There's also how to post it. You can post it, you can preview the posting all under actions. You saw where there was Power Apps, so I could have built a type of workflow into this one, stuff like that. I really do enjoy some of the built-in stuff. Okay, so we'll speed this up here. And again, these are my vendors, and I've highlighted one, and I want to show you, it's got statistics over here. If I wanted to go to its open orders, you can clearly see there's an open order here. I can simply click on that to get to the open orders. So reporting is not the same as it is in GP because it's kind of all built in here and easy to get to. I would recommend when you start using it to really stop and look at the screen in front of you, because it will give you a ton of links to go and do research on any given vendor. And this is just my vendor listing, right? So all of it's here for me to see. And we'll keep it going. And again, I can add a new vendor, and I can have different classes of vendors, which is what you just saw. And just moving around this is displaying just me moving around in the software. And again, looking up vendors is pretty easy. You can set them up to add them on the fly. You can go ahead and you'll notice none of those fields are here now because that personalization took them out. And I set the vendor invoice number. Of course, it's required. If I tried to get past it, it would have yelled at me. There's flows, there's approvals, new vendors, other things here. I just wanted to pause on some of these so that you guys could see some of the options and the drop downs above. And then of course, posting, printing, invoicing, adding the dimensions. You can automatically put an attachment in there. You can open this document in Excel. There's actually a way, and I think I have it a bit later, where you can not only open a document in Excel, but you can use Excel to update this particular document. If this document had multiple items and lines on it, I could open it in Excel, fill out all of the new items, hit publish, and my transactions updated, kind of like a mini integration manager or mini smart connect, if you will. The only problem there is if you don't know item numbers and that sort of thing, it doesn't give you any kind of a drop down if you do the Excel. Other navigation. In both BC and GP, you can add shortcuts. So a lot of people in GP really rely on their shortcuts. So what I want to do is show you both of them side by side. Here we are in GP, and we're going to be entering, doing shortcuts in GP. You see here I can drag up my quick links. I can add a window, a nav list, a smart list, an external link, like an Excel link or what have you. But that's what it's like to add a new quick link in GP. And of course, I refresh the page and there's my new link shortcut to sales batches. There's also the upper navigation bar shortcuts that you can turn on and off in GP. But you still, when you do these, you kind of have to know where it is, what you're looking for. And I'm not complaining. I absolutely love GP and know it like the back of my hand. However, it is a software you kind of need to be really well trained on to navigate correctly. So I wanted to add miscellaneous log entry to my project accounting setups, right? And that is, and again, you can add them over here at the home page, but again, that shortcut's only going to pretty much exist on the home page. So there's a few places you can add shortcuts in GP. Business Central, though, is a little bit easier. Again, you've got the drop downs here, but each of these drop downs and shortcuts depends on what you've got set up as your role in your settings. So let's talk about roles. In GP, you're set up with a role that doesn't have anything to do with your permissions, but the role does affect shortcuts. Now, same thing in Business Central. Only in Business Central, you can quickly go between roles to affect what shortcuts you see. This is indeed a pain in the butt. So what I'm going to suggest, I'm going to show you how the roles affect what you see, but I'm also going to show you how you can have just the one role and add the shortcuts that you need to do your job without having to switch between roles. So again, like I can choose accountant, and now all those shortcuts and drop downs change to what an accountant would see. That's super great. Like I'm not going to worry about that in the least, but if I wanted to customize my own shortcuts without going through having to change roles, that's also pretty easy. Now I'm just pausing here to show you some of the setups and links under the drop downs. But if I wanted to set up a shortcut to a purchase invoice, and if you had noticed a second ago, it was already set up as a shortcut. So you're going to see me unset it up and then reset it up. But it is this little bookmark tab here. So I'm going to uncheck it, right? And then recheck it so you can show where the bookmark got added. And that's kind of always going to show up on this role. So even though it doesn't necessarily exist in my drop downs up there, I can add pretty much whichever shortcuts I need to add without having to go through this role nonsense. So again, like I just changed roles and now all of that changes. And of course my purchase invoice shortcut kind of goes away. And it's going to be up to you. If you wear a lot of hats and you want to change roles so that you don't have to set up all these shortcuts, that's another consideration. Like maybe you do everything and your best bet is to go in and change roles often enough. Okay, let's talk about reporting in BC versus GP. So I'm not going to necessarily go through reporting in GP because we all know you have to go to the area page, you have to go to the reports. You have to figure out which of those options has the report that you're looking for, and then you kind of have to generate it. And so to save time, there's also smart lists in GP and things like that. So what I wanted to kind of show you was where those internal to GP reports, the ones that are at your modules, like the trial balance, exist. Oops, I did do the one in GP, but let's go here. This is what reporting looks like in Business Central. First, there's these links, like super cool links where if you want to go just look at these things, they're already on your home page. You can set up queues for yourself. You can set up your Power BI reports. And by the way, mine for the Kronos application weren't necessarily turned on right. Then you can go to, we're just going to go take a look at vendors, and I'll show you where the reports are because you don't see any drop down for reports. But if I needed a type of vendor report, it's pretty much, of course, there's the side KPIs that I could click on over there, but there's also the reports here, like the general vendor registers, the trial balances, the payables reports. You can add multiple filters in here that you just are a little more difficult within GP. And so I'm going to go back and run that report and show you kind of how it looks. So I'm going to do the trial balance and I'm going to put in a date. Now this is test data in the Kronos. Kronos in this application is like Fabricam is in GP. So I can send it to a PDF, a Word, I can schedule it. I'm going to pretty much just cancel that and try to send it to the screen, I think is what I did here. So again, like I'm going to put my date in. I could add many more filters. I could limit it to a posting group or what have you. Department filters, other filters, and I'm just kind of printing it. I could have sent it to the email. I could have this, I could have that, but it came up here as a PDF. That's what it looks like. And again, I could have quickly sent that to Excel and it actually comes out pretty formatted in Excel. And there's tons of other stuff here that you can report on. That's where a lot of the reports in BC live. So let's compare that to Dynamics GP reporting for the same type of report. I'd have to go to the area page. I have to go down to the reports, the trial balance, pick which one I want. And then, of course, I can click on one that exists, change the date there. And then if I wanted to filter it to a specific vendor, what have you, it's just a little bit more difficult. So there it is in GP. Interesting, right? Again, I'm still a fan of GP, but I really am digging Business Central. So in that vein, I want to talk about some extras. One, BC stays highly integrated with the rest of your Office apps. So as I told you, I use it for my back office. And this is a client that I'm not yet transacting with. And of course, I've grayed out everything important here. But I have a plug-in to my Outlook where if I'm looking at an email from a customer or a vendor, I can actually quickly get insights. And by the way, I can start transacting. If a client sends me something and says, hey, can you order me this or that? Then I can, from the email, start that transaction. If a vendor sends me something, I can create the transaction from that email. Say they PDF'd me an invoice. I can start that transaction from the email and attach the email to the transaction because most of BC is highly integrated with the rest of your Office applications. So let's look at Excel. Remember a second ago I said you could update a transaction in Excel. You start the transaction in BC, send it to Excel, add your line items to it. Go ahead and all you have to do is hit the publish button over on that side for the dynamics. And then when you go back into Business Central, that line that you just added upon refresh appears there, just like a mini integration tool. Okay, let's also talk about Power Apps and Power Automate, although I don't have any examples because that would have meant me having to build out an example and I didn't have time for that. I will tell you all of it is just easier with BC because it was architected to work with that stuff pretty automatically. Changes are being made all of the time to the Power Apps, how to build them out, the coding language skills you need for each of them. Microsoft just sent out a notice the other day that they're making it even easier with their low code or no code so that end users like accountants can build out kind of like their own applications. More awesomeness on applications like Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate in a future post. So let me sum up my thoughts. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm a diehard GP fan. That is not going to change. My partner that I work for is dedicated to helping GP customers maintain, even implement, even bring in new companies, keep going on GP like there is no BC. But I like the feel of Business Central. It's much more modern. The functionality is just easier. It stays updated automatically. I love the control and the high integration with my other Office products. I really love the insights and the auto reporting that's kind of embedded in everywhere. I really love that there's no need to maintain servers. Nobody's going to mess up an install, that sort of thing. What I don't like about BC as compared to GP is that I don't feel as in control of the security, or in the event that you really do have a business scenario in which you need to customize the functionality of an ERP system. I don't like that customizations are harder in BC. For instance, if one of your companies needed some work done and you needed to take it offline, just that one company, in BC, no user can be in any company while you're doing maintenance on that one company. In GP, you can just tell them to stay out of that one company while you work in it. So I don't like that. I got used to GP, but I'm finding there's a lot of stuff I do in GP that's just as good, if not better, in BC. So again, I'm Jo DeRuyter with Aisling Dynamics Business Solutions. If you need anything or have any questions about the user experience, feel free to reach out and I'll do my best to answer your questions. In the meantime, everyone out there, stay safe.